Oh, all right. Here it goes. It's going to go ahead and kick off right about now. Well, Scott, thank you so much for joining me. And this is Carbon Matters live stream. And this is Carbon County Commissioner Chris Lukasiewicz. And I'm joined by Scott Pompa, my friend and immediate past president of the Jim Thorpe area school district. And what I wanted to do, Scott, tonight is really, I want to retrace a little bit of history, really going back to August of 2016, but then quickly move forward to January 6th of 2020, on forward to really today. And where I am at is, or in my role of county commissioner. And I thought it would be most appropriate for me to bring someone in to kind of draw out from me some of the questions maybe that many people have in regards to the experience, what was accomplished, what wasn't accomplished, failures, successes, things like that nature. And I think second to Maggie, who deserves great credit for anything I've accomplished in my life, to include my most recent accomplishment serving the residents of Carbon County. I think you know me, and importantly, I believe you're one of the most informed citizens of Carbon County when it comes to, obviously not simply the school board, but my area or my bailiwick, which is county government. And you have the perspective from being an informed citizen, actually also having served as an employee or serving as an employee of county government. So I think you bring a lot of perspective. I would like this to be as free-flowing as you want it to be, but you're going to guide the conversation, and I'll be as frank and candid as appropriate and necessary to make sure everyone understands, my true feelings about all aspects of the occupation of being a political elected official here in Carbon County.
All right, Chris. Well, first of all, I want to thank you very much for this opportunity. It certainly is an honor and a pleasure to be sitting here with you tonight. And I really have to say, it is, with great, I am happy for you that you have selected not to seek re-election, but at the same time, knowing that there's just several days left in your term as county commissioner, just to hit on some of the key things that you had just mentioned, and also, the sadness that I am feeling as a Carbon County resident, and just the knowledge and the educational background that you have, and just the way that you dug into everything, with you went at everything 100%. And as a county taxpayer and a county resident, I believe that is something that, speaking on behalf of all the people in Carbon County, is something that was truly appreciated. And I think I've told you this in other conversations. I've been a county employee. My first was employed by the county back in the 1980s, and worked at the correctional facility. And at the time, the commissioners back then were Mr. Albert Brady Cup from Lehighton, Charles Wildonner here in Jim Thorpe, and the third commissioner at the time may have been Dean DeLong. I'm not quite sure, but I just really remember Mr. Cuck and Mr. Wildonner as being highly respected men who really, I felt, had Carbon County's best interest. And from that point on, I remained involved in following along with county politics, kind of just watching how things were going. And when you mentioned, 2016, I still remember, having you reach out to me and basically saying, hey, you want to come to breakfast some morning? And we started having these breakfast meetings with yourself and your wife
Right, yeah.
Maggie, you know, and all of a sudden your political aspirations started to come out, you know.
Yeah, but I think they really came out, Scott, that was just probably getting back into the community. But you were kind of the motivation for me to go to my first commissioners meeting. And that was, as best as I can recollect, was in August of 2016, is when we went to the first meeting, sitting in the first row. And we were doing that as regularly as possible. So that really started the ball rolling to get me involved with one, starting to look at county government to see what it was or was not doing for the residents of Carbon County. And, thinking about, my desire, and one of two reasons why we came back here is to make a difference and give back to the community that had provided me so much. And I always said, it goes back to us where we grew up on the front hill there. I always say my belief, my values, my work ethics were formed in those years of us as kids, growing up through graduation in high school. So to me, August of 2016 is where the ball started rolling, and then it took off through conversations. And then if you roll forward all the way to 28 March 2018, that is where yourself, Jeannie, and Billy helped us, launch C4, which was, the campaign that started at that moment.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to take a few steps back. I'm going to step back actually into the 1960s when we were two children growing up on the lower end of Center Avenue.
Yeah.
And we played a lot of Army together, and I always knew your brand of Army was different than everyone else's, So when I knew at a young age that you were definitely going to seek out the military, and what you have accomplished alone in the military was always something that I was just marveled at and awestruck by, actually, because you went and from that little boy who played Army with his neighborhood friend to becoming such a leader in the military and the accomplishments that you had. So when we started having these discussions about, hey, I got some political aspirations, I'm interested in county government. And I thought, oh my God, this is just going to be amazing, because what you had accomplished just in your military career and your educational career, I thought, this is the guy we need. This is what Carbon County needs. So bringing Chris Lukasiewicz into the mix, we started having some conversations. How are we going to attack this? What are we going to do? And fortunately for you, you were very strong-willed and you were determined. I'm going to do this. There were barriers that were placed up against you. The party was not very welcoming, and you just had this determination that I'm going to get through this. And, of course, in the primary, you knocked off, a seated incumbent in Tom Gerhardt, which was kind of a shocker. And from that point on, I mean, you had the support of your family. You had also the support of Larry and Marianne,
absolutely,
who were incredible.
They were
in getting some things done for you. And very grassroots, knocking on doors, going out and meeting people, making those phone calls was really rather phenomenal as far as what you were able to accomplish.
I think the one other aspect there is the ability to recognize the power of social media.
Yes.
All right. Because there's no doubt, and to me, I think about what I have done leveraging social media starting back in about 2018. I mean, in 2018 is actually when I started live streaming, with my iPhone commissioners meetings. So that kind of got the ball moving in regards to leveraging social media.
Absolutely. Not only did you leverage it when you were mounting your campaign, then you brought it to, you brought the whole full big picture into county government by live streaming meetings, which were never live streamed before, so it was something that definitely just rode off the coattails of your campaign right into county government. And I have to tell you, there's been many times when I tuned in and watched the commissioners meeting where people didn't have, and I see people who come to the meetings on a weekly basis. I'm thinking you could actually watch this from home now, but there is a different atmosphere being there in person and, watching through a screen. But just, that whole aspect of the social media and, how you used it to your advantage and your leverage. But, there is also a downside to social media.
Oh, of course.
You live by the sword, you die by the sword.
Oh my gosh,
And I think both of us in the roles that we were in saw that, hey, one day someone will love you, and the next day someone will hate you.
Yeah, you go from hero to zero, just like
that.
Yeah, you really do.
Yeah, and it's all depending on what your position is and whether they agree with you. But let's face it, in politics, everybody has to kind of agree to disagree.
Yeah.
Now, here's the one thing that I don't quite understand, though, Chris, and you lived it more than I did, is you got 3 county commissioners, okay, and you would really think everyone was elected to do the best for the county, but at times, there's like the inner fighting, and just so much of it was just formed on, well, this is my belief, where is it really going to benefit the citizens of Carbon County, or do we need to get into a power struggle over this? And I saw those power struggles, and I participated in my own, on the school board. But the school board is 9 members, county government is 3. You have 3 people who make up the entire county of Carbon and its communities, and you have these 3 people who are elected to make the decisions that are the best for Carbon County. And going into this, I really was very comfortable thinking that Chris Lukasiewicz is going to think of the people of Carbon County. And your slogan of, if it matters to you, it matters to me, is something that I always thought, if he says it, it's true. If you're going to bring it to his attention, I guarantee you there will be some follow-up on that.
And I took that to heart. There were, I actually had 3 kind of little sayings that I always kept on my dry erase board, but I always went back to thinking, who does this matter to? And if it matters to you, it matters to me. And that doesn't mean I'm going to agree with you. That doesn't mean I'm necessarily going to carry your water through realization, but I'm going to take it seriously and I'm going to examine it. I'm going to analyze it and make a determination if what you are pushing, what you desire, is in the best interest of the public overall. And there's times where people came to me and said, but you said it matters to you. I said, it matters to me because it's your opinion. It doesn't mean at the end of the day, after I do my assessment and analysis, that I'm going to determine that it's ultimately in the best interest of the citizens of Carbon County. And if it's not, well, then I'm going to reject that idea and look for maybe a better way to meet some of the needs of that particular resident, while not simply, taking that and running with their ball if it's not going to do great good.
I completely agree, and that is what I saw from you. In fact, I had the opportunity on several occasions over this past 4 years to, be in your office. And I'm going there right now. We're gonna go backwards in a little bit, but I want to hit on this while it's fresh in my mind. When you mentioned those whiteboards, those dry erase boards, every time I ever went into your office, from pretty much your first week, that thing was full of what you wanted to see get done. So what is left on that whiteboard today is what I'd really like to know.
Well, that's good, because what I had done is, and I'll explain the dry erase board for those who might not be familiar with them. It surprised me, if you're one of the 1,865 followers on my Facebook page or my YouTube and stuff like that, you've seen those pictures of those dry erase boards regularly being posted, because one was, which would have been over on my left side as I was sitting at my desk. Those were the more permanent items that I wanted on the board, to include my priorities. And while I had an overall vision for what I wanted to accomplish, and I posted this, 4 years prior to taking office, or excuse me, 4 years prior to today, well before as my campaign was starting, each year I would put up to 10 priorities for that particular year. And again, I published them not only on my dry erase board, but then I would broadcast them to the public on social media. And then directly behind me, that was kind of my brainstorming board. What was I thinking about today, or something I wanted to address and analyze in the immediate moment? And I will tell you, because it was also public, some of it was encoded, little codes that only and it's not simply my poor penmanship, but it was actually just little things that only if I read it, I knew it.
Sure.
Because I also knew there were cleaning ladies and other people who were going into my office. And, my saying is, do not trust, confide, or go native in anyone in county government. So I did have to be somewhat sensitive to that. But that brings us to the point, kind of starting from the back, what was left undone? And there was a couple small things, and they're not necessarily from, I don't know if you recall, I had something called my day one motions, but when I had my vision for Carbon County, I also had, achieving that vision, I put 24 motions that I would put forth on day one. And I utilized this as my roadmap. And really the only ones that are on here that I don't think I fully addressed, and I'm somewhat disappointed in, but I did ultimately ran out of time, ran out of bandwidth. One, I wanted to reduce the number of PO boxes. That's a little thing, but there are 21 PO boxes that continue to cost county government a considerable amount of money, right?
Yep.
Like I always said, we shouldn't be doing the post office's job. The post office job is to deliver the mail. They should be delivering the mail. We shouldn't have county employees spending 15 minutes every day going to pick up mail at PO boxes that we really had no requirement for. So while I ultimately, it would have been in year 2, Wayne agreed to go ahead and have it assessed, the practicality. I was never able to get it up on my priority list of things I needed to get done to actually finish up having a third party come in and look at it and say, okay, of these 21, we could get rid of 17 PO boxes.
Sure.
So that was the one. And the other one was evaluations of employees.
Yes.
And I finally, about 2 years ago, and I want to focus first and foremost on department heads. So what I did in 2021, I evaluated all 21 department heads that fall under the Board of Commissioners. I took them in at the beginning of 2021. I said, let's talk about your year. What are you going to achieve? How are you going to get there? And then I said, well, if you have any stutters along the way, let's talk, and I will get you do my best to get you the resources to achieve what you want to achieve. And then informally throughout the year, I would attempt to get down and just talk. Hey, how are things going? Do you have any issues? Do you have any problems? Or if I had a problem with the department head during the year, on the spot correction. Hey, I noticed we're having a problem here. What are you going to do to resolve it? How can I help you resolve that issue? And then at the end of 2021, I brought all 21 department heads into my office, boom, 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 and gave them an evaluation and filed it. Because the issue is at the department head level, the way it works in theory is the chief clerk, the county administrator, is the direct supervisor for 21 department heads. And there's no realistic way anyone can supervise or effectively evaluate 21 department heads. So what I actually ended up developing, I thought, well, why aren't the county commissioners evaluating department heads, right? So, we of course should be evaluating the chief administrator, but what my plan was, and again, that's one I didn't get to, is each commissioner, on year one, when they come in, each of them is assigned 5 department heads to assess in year one. And then the chief clerk takes 6. So that's 15 plus 6 is 21. So for that year, I would have, let's say, planning, tax assessment, tax claim, aging, public defender. And up throughout the year, I would evaluate that person, counsel them, provide them guidance, and then boom, at the end of the year, do their final evaluation, and then we would rotate. Now I would take Rocky's 5, and then Wayne would take my 5, and Ellie would take, so over 4 years, you got to know in depth every department head and every department, and they all would be evaluated on a regular basis. And then I felt, if you set the example for the department heads and you hold them to task, they will effectively and efficiently start assessing their subordinates. But again, training is a part of an issue, right? You don't have good leadership development.
Yeah.
So again, you would have to coach them along. How do you bring someone into your office and say, well, you're doing a great job in this area. However, in this area, you need improvement. And, it's very difficult for people who are untrained to do that.
It is very difficult. And you raise some real valid points here. And the fact that you took the initiative, I think was great. However, I think asking county commissioners to evaluate employees is a very difficult task in itself. And I think, probably somewhere along the lines, and I know the HR department in the county is very small, but I think at some point, the HR department is going to have to grow. I believe every county employee does have a job description, correct?
Yeah.
So your job description basically is telling you what your job is, what's involved in your job, and how you're supposed to do your job, and that is how you should actually be evaluated. Now, where does that evaluation come into play is the key part. Should it be the commissioners? No. Should it be the chief clerk? Probably not. But you got to find a way to find maybe a department head to oversee certain departments, and go about it that way. But that right now, it's all hindsight,
right?
Because that is one of the things that certainly.
But think about the importance of evaluations. If you believe in merit-based pay increases, unless you have an honest evaluation system, you truly can't make objective decisions on merit-based increases.
Chris,
right?
That's a great point. You really can. Right. And the other side of it too is evaluations are also a tool to help an employee grow and learn. So that's the other side of it. It's not always all about the money part of it. It's also investing into that employee and saying, hey, you're the person that's chosen for this job. We want you to grow. Your job description is this. And, so, coming from somebody who was a former supervisor for many years and a department manager, I know how valuable those tools were to me.
Right.
And, luckily, the system that I came out of was merit-based, So when you say merit-based, it certainly, it resonates with me and I understand it. And I believe the county has a ways to go with that. Will that occur now? I don't know. I doubt that it will.
I would say then, let's stop faking it. If we're not going to have an effective, enforced evaluation policy and program, get rid of it. I don't like finger drills. If we're not going to use it, lose it. It's that simple. So again, you have to make a choice, or the county has to make a choice. Otherwise, get rid of the policy that they have.
Well, before we move on from that, my last comment on that, Chris, is, as I stated earlier, I was employed by the county since the mid 1980s, and this is something that has plagued them since then, where employees are not fairly properly evaluated. Employees are, being told they're doing a good job when they're probably not
Not-
doing a good job
right.
at all, you
Yeah.
know, only because you've never been properly evaluated.
Right.
And, you know, we do have job descriptions in place, but yeah.
Yeah. So
Hmm.
those were really the two out of about 24 primarily or initially set up objectives that I had set. And a lot of those, again, ended up being achieved with the exception of those two. There might be one or two others out there.
Well, just let me
Yeah.
ask you though, why the one with the PO boxes to me seems like a no-brainer. You know, what is the resistance there that people want to go pick up their own mail? I mean, why couldn't you have one designated person go over to the post office, pick the mail up, and then
You mean the union postal clerk that we already have as an employee?
yes.
How about that?
How about
How
that?
about that? You know, so it's not like you had to hire an individual.
Correct.
You know, you may want to give that individual, if their job description for some reason excluded picking up mail for the entirety of county government, yeah, you may have to change the job description and pay the person a buck or two more. But in order to save $60,000 a year, I think it would be well worth that in investment. I think
Absolutely.
the where does the resistance come from? I think part of it isn't just simply resistance because of who the messenger is, but it comes to the fact that there are three branches of county government: the courts, the row offices, and then the departments under the Board of Commissioners.
Yes.
And they want to continue to control every aspect. And I suspect the first thing about 1620 rights, that has to do with managing my office.
Mhm.
To manage my office, I have to have a PO box.
Wow.
You know,
Yeah.
well, what I would do, I would say, you know what, then I'm going to start cutting your budget. As the commissioners who have the authority for budget, well, I'm going to take away the money for that particular line item. You know, again, you have to use a forcing mechanism. Or, you know what, I'm not going to sign a contract for X for you, because only the commissioners can sign a contract until you know.
Well, sadly, that's where the politics comes into
Yeah.
play, and it kind of all gets bogged down. But I would honestly believe that anybody who is an elected official, which includes your row officers, and it even includes your courts, your
Right.
judges are
Yeah.
also elected. These are people who've been elected by the people of Carbon
Yeah.
County, and they should be looking at any task at all to reducing costs. You know,
And I only actually had one row officer who came and said, I would like to get rid of mine.
yeah.
Only one who was enthusiastic about it. And so, and again, I thought again, just like in many organizations, you have a central mail room where all the mail comes to. You have a mail clerk who, right, separates it out, which that mail clerk already does,
Yeah.
right there in the hallway between the commissioner's conference room and IT and stuff like that. And now all it would be a matter of it being distributed. Now, one or two offices, you know, one office might be challenged by that, elections,
Mhm.
because of the amount of mail, mostly with mail-in ballots. That's a tough one. To me, the post office should be delivering that one directly.
Yeah.
44 Susquehanna Street, that address should get daily delivery. Again, shouldn't be our election clerks going up to pick up ballots coming in, coming out. That should be, you know, postal delivery direct.
Great point.
You
Yes,
know?
absolutely.
Yeah.
That is a very, very good point.
Yeah.
You know, it's something that we could actually get off on another whole discussion on, you know, the whole mail-in ballot.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
So much over the last 4 years has, you know, come to light just with mail-in ballots. You know?
Absolutely. You're in the county
Yeah.
too, and across and stuff like that. I think, Scott, it's important to understand. I think it is, you were talking about, I'll call it my work ethic, or I'm going to get the job done. You know, I am a nose to the grindstone type of person, and that has its good and bad side. The good side is I give 110%. And I get things done, you know, and again, doesn't mean I move everything through realization, because some things getting done is the fact that, you know what, that was a dumb idea, right? And you drop dumb ideas.
Sure.
But again, it comes at the expense of other things, like quality of life issues with family. You know, I'm a nose to the grindstone person, so you know what? I'm not big into personal relationships. I don't go to work to make friends or anything, you know. I'm not trying to meet with people who I'm gonna go out and have a beer with after work. I'm there to do the citizens' work, their job, and when I'm done, I'm done. You know, so that kind of ties into my personality because again, you don't see me laughing and smiling a lot. What you see me is down doing the work.
Absolutely.
You know,
always carrying a book with you to
Yeah.
write something in,
Yeah.
take notes, and
Yep.
that is something that will
Yeah.
stick in my mind forever.
Yeah.
And that you did prior to even being elected. You know,
Right,
once
it
you-
was, and you know, that was ingrained into me in my military career,
Mhm.
right? You always had a notebook and pen, right? Because you never could simply rely on your memory. And when someone said something important that needed to be done, you know, go ahead, back it
Jot
up,
it
not
down.
only in your brain housing group, but go ahead and write it down so you can reference back to it and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I think all leaders have stupid ideas. It's
Yep.
just the real good leaders that realize that they're stupid.
Right,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
there are other people that hold on to stupid ideas
Right.
only because maybe they're trying to please somebody else. You
Right.
know, and that
Mhm.
one of the points that you just made was about your nose to the grindstone.
Uh-huh.
Was when you had said that you were going to run for office. I always looked at you as this is a guy who's not doing this to be somebody.
Mhm.
This is a guy who's doing this to do what's right for Carbon County.
Yeah, yeah.
And not everyone has agreed. I mean, I've followed your social media
Yeah.
and I see some people like even the stuff to Mock Chunk Lake Park, which I thought was a great idea.
Oh, yeah.
People had issues with buses picking kids up and taking them to Mock Chunk Lake
Right.
Park.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
wow, why would you? I
Mhm.
mean, God, these
Yeah.
kids, get them out of their house. They're sitting at home on their
Yeah.
electronic devices. We're seeing how bad social media is for mental health of children and
yeah.
teens,
Yeah.
and here we have an opportunity to get them out and get outside, get some fresh air, go spend the day at the lake.
Right. And I think it's so hard for us because, you know, growing up, obviously here in Jim Thorpe, we had a bus that we used all the time.
Yeah.
We went with one or two chaperones in a school bus with 40, 45 kids, maybe out to Hickory Run because we belonged to Kemmer Park summer program and stuff like that. You know, so to hear, you know, people who are resistant to allowing our youth to mature and develop, you know, it's kind of concerning. Again, you know, things have changed in the world and you do have to take certain cautions or precautions and stuff like that. But I too get surprised sometimes by positions like that.
Well, that was one that really kind of floored me,
Yeah.
to be honest with you, as I
Mhm.
was watching that whole thing unfold, and I just thought this was really great. And I saw
Yeah.
that there was opposition to it, and opposition from, your people that are sitting up
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
the three seats, the
Right.
two seats
Yeah.
next to you,
Yeah.
and this is not a good idea.
Yeah.
How is it not a good idea?
And unfortunately, we lost about 5 weeks of that program, but it ended up being, according to the assessment that Atlanta and Carbon Transit did, extremely successful to the point where they're looking at starting next year, 2024, probably mid-year, to make Mock Chunk Lake Park a regular part of one of their routes.
Yes.
You know, and the story that AJ, the planner, gives publicly is about that one individual who, for the first time in their life, and their time in Carbon County, they didn't even know Mock Chunk Lake Park existed. And they got on the bus, I believe it was in Lansford. The bus took them there, and she spent the day at Mock Chunk Lake Park.
Incredible.
So again, you make it one person at a time.
Yeah.
So I think the beach bus will probably continue.
Well, I hope it does.
Yeah.
I mean, it may not, but I really,
Yeah.
and it's one of those situations where I can go back to and just repeat myself from earlier, where I said, when you are elected to that position, you don't get into these personal struggles. Oh, that's Chris's idea. I think
Right.
it's stupid.
Right.
Where actually, when you think of the big picture and how it's going to benefit people in Carbon County, it's a no-brainer.
Right. Well, I will tell you on 6 January 2020 with my day one motions, that's was the resistance. Not these are good ideas,
Yeah.
but these ideas come from this individual.
Correct.
And therefore,
Yes.
we will oppose them, we won't second them, or whatever the case may be.
Well, the surprising part for me, Chris, was to see that actually play out and come, to that head.
Yeah.
Because I think we experienced quite a bit of that in your whole election campaign.
Sure, of course, yeah.
And then to see that here now we have the 3 elected officials, and it's still going to continue,
Yeah.
was a bit mind-boggling
Yeah.
to me. But it was that thing that really made me realize politics can be downright ugly.
Yeah.
Because sometimes
Yeah.
it's, you will overlook what is best for everyone because it is the idea of this person, or we didn't like
Yeah.
him from day one.
But did you know on 6 January 2020, you could have sat at home, and I think and watched that on social media. Now, I will tell you on 6 January, that was coming off of my iPhone still. And for many months after that, that was coming on. But, to me, that was one of my greatest accomplishments. One of my two was transparency in government.
Oh, absolutely.
And what I did. Now, on 6 January, the 2 commissioners voted against live streaming. Or they probably didn't second the motion, might be more accurate. They opposed live streaming meetings. So there's never like a good emergency to take advantage of. So what happened as soon as COVID started?
Yeah.
I knew I had it.
How about
so then boom,
Uh-huh.
I knew I would make it happen. So I just took advantage, because otherwise I truly believe we still wouldn't be live streaming today if it wouldn't be for the fact that COVID came and I was able to take advantage of that and force it through.
Chris, that is a great answer. And that was
Yep.
one of the things I was going to ask you
Yep.
about, because we had experienced the COVID thing, on the
Yep.
county level and myself on the school district
Yeah.
level. And some of the stuff that we walked away with was rather amazing with what we were able to accomplish with the assistance of COVID.
Right.
For as bad as it was, it made some things better.
Yeah.
And I have to say, now that I think of it in hindsight, you were probably correct that had it not been for COVID, these live streamings probably would have been.
Oh, they wouldn't, and I found too, then I was able to take it to the next level, because when we did the renovations, quote unquote, the renovations, it was basically a complete rebuild of 44 Susquehanna Street. I was able to get all that technology into that space also. And at the same time, that's when I was able to push through the motion that all public meetings would be live streamed. So today, all public meetings are expected to be live streamed. The only one we have a little challenge with, and I still live stream myself, is the Mock Chunk Lake Parks and Rec. Just because they don't have their own system out there yet. So other than that, all our public meetings are live streamed today.
As they should be.
Yeah, but what's important to that, though, it's not simply the live streaming, because I love the transparency issue, because that's so important to me. It was the fact my colleagues voted against, again, for my vision, publishing the agenda 24 hours prior. They voted against that. They voted against having the minutes published 48 hours after they were approved. It took me, for the agendas, I was able to get that in because ended up being that the state was going to end up doing it eventually.
Okay.
So I was able to force that through. I think in year 2 it may have been. And then the minutes, I think they just capitulated to, because I said, 48 hours after approved. But what was happening, people, as you know, Scott, as we were going to the Board of Commissioners meeting, we would show up having no idea what was going to be on the agenda. And then they would hand us the agenda when we stepped in, 5 minutes prior to the meeting. You had no chance to prepare. for the meeting,
Yeah,
and that's why it was so important to get those agendas at least 24 hours prior.
absolutely.
You know?
Actually, it's a bit sketchy to me. It
Yeah.
seems to me like, one, what are you trying to hide? And two is like, where's the sunshine violations
Yeah,
here? You
yeah.
know, like this
Yeah.
stuff should all be out to the public
Yeah.
prior to a meeting.
Yeah,
Because how is the public
Uh.
to be informed
yeah,
and then come to a meeting?
Yeah.
If you're gonna have public comment and the opportunity to hand me an agenda as I
Yeah.
walk in the door and then ask me if I have public comment on something,
right,
it's a lot easier to prepare if
Prepare
you
for
have a day in advance.
exactly. Well, it's interesting, you mentioned the Sunshine Act, because I hosted a great roundtable discussion with folks from DCED. One of the leading organizations in Pennsylvania brought Marta Gouger in also. We had a great discussion on it. But talking about transparency in government, I went back and reviewed online minutes from the Board of Commissioners for like 7 years of minutes. And understand there's about 50 meetings a year. So you're talking about 350 sets of minutes. And what I noticed was there was never a no vote. So you're talking, and the motions are numbered throughout the year. And I can't remember how many hundreds of motions there are a year, but there are literally hundreds. So you have, let's say, 300 motions a year that are made, right? Then you have 3 commissioners who have the opportunity to say yay or nay. So now you have 900 opportunities each year to have 1 no vote. Over 7 years, now you're talking, 5,600 opportunities for a no vote. Never a no vote.
Wow.
So wait, how can these 3 individuals
Yeah.
agree
on everything?
5,600 times?
Wow.
Again, it raises a concern, an issue about transparency.
Sure.
And what is taking place behind closed
Closed
doors.
doors.
Now, at the same time, and again, this is going to sound self-serving, I have not seen during my time in county government abuse of executive sessions. I have seen where in executive sessions, we would start going in a direction, but then step back from it, meaning no decisions are made other than what's going to be on the agenda.
Right.
And that's a tough, as you know, that's a really tough to do sometimes, to stay, hey, we're not making a decision, yet at the same time, as you present your position, you tend to be communicating
Yes.
how you're going to vote. So the
Well,
gray
absolutely.
area.
Something that used to occur regularly was, in a school board executive session, well, can we do a straw poll?
Oh, right.
Yeah, well, can we do a straw poll? Well, basically, yeah, you're gonna find out where everybody stands on this, and you're making your decision there.
Right there.
Whether you're gonna go out
Yeah.
and into the public and,
Yeah.
stick to it or not, but.
Yeah, well, I will tell you some of my strategy though, because at times I had to make a point. I would play devil advocate in the meeting in order just to, I'm not going to say disguise with my actual position. One, I was doing it because again, I was seriously wanting to look at both sides, but yet at the same time, I did want to use shock and awe at times in the public meeting, by not seconding a motion or actually voting no, and then getting the opportunity during the discussion period on that motion to explain why I was either for or against it. And again, with my colleagues not knowing previously, what I was more inclined to, to kind of catch them off balance. I mean, you might say, well, that's part of the politics of it. Okay, to me, it's part of the strategy of trying to achieve what's in the best interest of the citizens of Carbon County, and also at times to bring out maybe shortcomings and deficiencies in your colleagues that the public wouldn't otherwise see. And they need to understand that who you see in public isn't the same person in private,
Absolutely.
you know?
Mhm.
Yeah, and you see that a lot.
Well, I saw, actually, now that you say that strategy was used, absolutely, it was used by you many a time.
Mhm.
And I'm thinking of the last meeting that I think I watched was the budget meeting.
Yeah,
Where Commissioner Notstein wanted a tax increase
Yeah.
and a little bit at a time.
yep,
Now, funny, that's what we hear at the school all the time, and we haven't increased taxes in 14 years, I
Yeah.
believe, in the Jimcourt School District.
Mhm.
But, you know, we always get the recommendation in the 4 years I've been on the board, increase a little bit at a time,
Mhm.
increase a little bit at a time. So the commissioner made his pitch about, we need a tax increase, but if we just do it a little bit.
Mhm.
And I think at this point, you would, you know, you were kind of just letting them go back and
Yeah,
forth.
yeah.
And then you voiced your opinion, maybe it should be a little bit at a time, and he took that as like,
Right.
oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah, but what I was saying, it should be a little bit at the time, but what I was saying, a little bit at the time, not the tax increase, but building up, let's say, the reserve,
Mhm.
or what I always refer to as the carryover money that gets us through January through the end of April, when there's very little to no tax revenue coming in, because
Right.
it doesn't correspond. We're no longer in our penalty period or any type of the coupon periods and stuff like that. So that's
There's
right.
there's no inflow of money, yeah.
Right. So
Uh-huh.
that's what, see, he thought I was referring specifically to taxation. And I
Uh-huh.
wasn't referring to the tax. I was saying you need to increase, again, what I was trying to communicate was you need to get that reserve back up, maybe $1 million or $2 more from where it is today, because over the past 4 years, other than the 19.8% tax increase that Rocky and Wayne reaffirmed on 6 January 2020 by not reopening the budget, which I proposed,
Mhm.
you know, Rocky and I have stood fast for fiscal year 21, 22, 23, and 24, and prevented a tax increase, and rather thought it was most appropriate and for me to stick to my going in position of no tax. I would not vote for any tax increase. I'd vote for figuring ways to raise more revenue other than taxes, and I would look for ways to reduce the budget versus raising taxes. So for 4 years, we haven't had a tax increase, but we have drawn down our carryover to the point where next year for 2025, unless there's significant cuts, and there shouldn't be any issue about doing that, there's going to have to be a tax increase. I proposed this year initially for the budget, let's freeze the budget at last year's. That didn't happen. Again, that was pushed aside.
Mhm.
But again, so you either have to freeze it or you have to raise revenue. And I say raise revenue other than taxes until it's absolutely necessary. And as you know, sooner or later, it's going to become necessary. You
So
know?
on January 6th, 2020, when
Mhm.
you made that proposal to
Yep.
reduce taxes on senior citizens, I believe.
That was another one.
Uh-huh.
Right.
Yep.
And it was, again, my colleagues don't read the fine print. They don't listen. What it said is to assess the viability of a senior tax rebate program, which would have reduced for senior citizens 66 and over who have 10 years residence in Carbon County and have paid property taxes for a minimum of 10 years. So I didn't want someone coming from New Jersey, you know, tomorrow and get the same benefits of someone who's
Who's been here forever.
Right.
Mhm.
Each year you would reduce their county taxes a $250,000.
Wow.
Now, if they were a widow or a widower, it would be 0.50 or a $500,000 reduction each year. Now, I looked at the actuary tables and stuff like that. So normally, you know, a gentleman's going to last until he's about 74, 75, a woman till 79, you know, so I did all those numbers. So I had a pretty good sense that we could have pulled it off for senior citizens.
So where was the county going to make up that lost revenue?
They were going to have to make it up by either reducing expenditures or finding other revenue streams to do that, unquestionably, tightening the belt. But again, I would rather have senior citizens still in their homes than being put out in the street, you know? And bottom line, it was a humanitarian gesture. because senior citizens are struggling to meet the challenge of affordable housing. Because just think about the number of short-term rentals that Carbon County has gained in the last 10 years. So all those short-term rentals have taken away, right, affordable housing,
Yes.
right?
Mhm.
The other issue is, as you get older, you don't need a 3 and a 4 bedroom home,
Mhm.
so, but you're paying taxes on that. And so we have to help senior citizens, right? So they're talking about, well, let the state do it because there's a little rebate program. I think it was $650 a year. Now it's a little bit higher.
Yeah.
I said, you know what? I'm going to take care of our own citizens.
Yeah.
Don't count on Doyle Heffley and Argyle to do what we should be doing.
Sure.
Taking care of our citizens. And it was a rebate program and not a tax reduction, because a rebate program you could do. A tax reduction, because of the law, we couldn't do on our own, but we could do a rebate.
Are there any counties in the Commonwealth that currently do any programs like that?
I honestly don't know, but I had a legal team from Lancaster County who actually pro bono reviewed all of my day one motions for me. They invested a lot of time pro bono, highly recognized a law firm from Lancaster County. And every one of those was at least within the realm of the possibility from a legal perspective. Now they didn't go in and look at the dollar figures and stuff like that. But again, what I said, Scott, was assess the viability. I didn't say do it, because that's not what I do. I don't go in and say do it. Almost any motion I make, it's about, let's assess it. And then if it comes back, then based upon the results of the assessment, then let's vote on it if we should move forward.
Chris, to me, that's just unbelievable. And
Yeah.
and it's again a testament to you and the work that you did. You just didn't go into anything and throw it out there and say, we're going to try this. You actually had people look into it, check it out to see if it was something that could actually be pulled off. I'm very concerned moving forward, because I don't think we're going to have anyone else that does anything like this,
Well, I hope we do, though. Again, I'm not.
I do too, but
the known,
it's
it's not it isn't a known unknown. Actually, it is a known what's coming in.
Yeah.
And so there's nothing that shows me that depth of analysis will take place. Yeah, I can't be hopeful like you on that one. Yeah, I don't see it.
Yeah.
I mean, it would also say, on my 60-some, what I call passionately assertive driven impact. So items that I had a decisive role in successfully moving forward. One of them that worries me most, and it probably isn't significant to the residents of Carbon County, is written correspondence, formal written correspondence. When something left that office that was going to the governor, that was going, let's say, to the board that would look at prisoners and consider their early release from prison, those types of formal letters, there's only one person who drafted those. And quite frankly, I'm going to talk as humbly as I can. And I'll tell you what, and I am no brain surgeon. I'm a simple graduate of Jim Thorpe High School. Those documents were written by Chris Lukasiewicz, and they were impactful documents. And unfortunately, no one of colleagues has that ability to effectively communicate in writing. And that does concern me, it does concern me.
It's much deeper than that, Chris. Anyone who had taken the time to attend a meeting or watch a meeting on live stream just knew by, the way that you researched and your knowledge on things. I think everybody has to be concerned that element is now removed, because as I said earlier, I have watched county government. I watched all forms of government. I mean, local, national, I watched our borough in action, the township in action that I live in now, the school district in action. And to get somebody up there that can actually think things through and have knowledge and do the work, the insight
Yeah.
to learn about this stuff.
Mhm.
Most people don't do that, you
Right.
know, and as a resident of the county, that is something that I believe I and many others will truly miss
Mhm.
because it's not there.
Yeah. Well, I think one thing, and I've already seen it playing out, probably the greatest travesty, uh, that had occurred, uh, on the macro level, and I'll give you one on the micro level. The failure to proceed with the purchase of 410 Center Avenue, the failure to proceed with it with the offer that Joe Bennett made to the county to lease to own that building. We're already seeing where that would have been about a $6 to $7 million project, reduced from about 9.5. That would include with the additional parking. You're already seeing one office down at 525 Iron Street, Children and Youth, has already cost over $3.5 million. It's only 2/3 done.
Yeah.
2/3 done.
Mhm.
You know, yet up there on the hill, we were going to bring aging in, we were going to bring workforce development in there, yet still have 4,000 to 5,000 potential additional square footage for office space, potential office space that would literally last the county for untold decades into the future.
Well, I have to agree,
Mhm.
and I was involved because that was a school district owned property.
Yeah.
And I know that we had, entered an agreement and leased space to the county.
Yep.
And there was no doubt that while the county was leasing that
Yep.
space, it was providing, a
Oh my
great
gosh.
opportunity for them
Yeah.
to expand,
Yeah.
stay local,
Yeah.
and I really thought that that building purchase should have gone through. I believe that's another one where the thought process became,
Yeah.
hunkered down by something,
Yeah.
but,
Well, you know what part of the other thing was, Scott, that I had mentioned on that, even if we would have just kept that for this 18+ month courthouse project and then sold it after, we'd make money. We are adding 6 to 7 months. We are adding millions of dollars on to this courthouse project because we didn't have the space to empty the courthouse for about 11 months. Therefore, we are paying for 18 months. And just in money alone for consulting, we're paying over $30,000 a month.
wow.
Just for consulting.
Yeah.
That isn't talking about all the additional costs associated with projects being expanded. That there are add-ons provided by all the primes and subs. We're losing millions of dollars because of that. That's just the reality.
That is the
Yep.
reality
Yep.
of it. And
You
I don't really think
Yep.
it took a very smart person
Yep.
to really figure out
Yep.
that there it sat,
Yep.
this is our
Yeah.
answer, and we left it get away.
Yeah. So now we're contracting out for snow removal. We have our maintenance and IT guys, when there's an issue, now they're spending 20 to 25 minutes on the road, having to go down there, right? Once you start decentralizing government,
Sure.
what happens? All these additional costs.
Costs.
Now you're hiring additional cleaning ladies. Now you're hiring, your maintenance, your IT staff, any of the services. Now you have another sheriff who has to be down there. So all these additional costs, and just the O&M costs of independent facilities compared to bringing people together in an upgraded, basically a new building.
Yeah,
Time spent on the road when children and youth have to come to court.
sure.
Again, you just use invaluable time.
Why send them into the next community is beyond me
Yeah.
when they could have been just blocks
Yeah.
up the road from the courthouse.
Yeah. The other building I wish, and I did see it until too late, it came available. And it was just within the last 12, 15 months or so. across from Immaculate Conception Church, or where the
yeah.
Immaculate Conception
Mhm.
School.
Well,
The
it was
carpet-
Gloucester Commit.
Yeah, exactly. I think that would have been another great building.
Sure.
You know, the problem is you didn't have parking right there, except for, you know, you'd have to work out an arrangement with the church.
Mhm.
But I thought that would have been another great building,
Mhm.
you know, even like to bring aging back into Jim Thorpe,
Uh-huh.
you know?
So while we're on this topic, very
Yeah.
quick, you can make this brief if you want,
Yeah.
but we're discussing buildings.
Yeah.
And as long as I've been following county politics, there have been bundles and bundles of money placed into building upgrades, and it just never seems to end. Now, I get it, you're limited down there, you're expanding, you're
Mhm.
bursting at the seams, but at what point do we realize we're putting out all this money for buildings? And then I'm thinking of Commissioner Arner, who is determined to give every employee a raise, okay? And you have employees who are disgruntled, who
Mhm.
often bring up, they're gonna go put, you know, millions of dollars into another building, but they won't give us $1.50 an hour, you know?
Mhm.
So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's a fair argument. And I think what we should be providing individuals are not Taj Mahal spaces, but sufficient spaces to do their jobs in a comfortable environment. That gives you hopefully the slack or excess money in order to do things like salaries. However, my argument would be a building, quote unquote, is a one-time, one-year investment. You spend $3 million, you pay for it. Salary increases perpetuate forever. You know, so it's somewhat apples and oranges, but I would rather invest in people than I would in buildings and facilities. It's just like in schools, right? You know, I would rather invest in good teachers than I necessarily would in the building itself.
Sure.
Because I think you can learn in a simple a facility and
Absolutely.
not a Taj Mahal
Yep.
like facility.
Well,
You know?
most places today, you see people working in little cubicles, you know,
Well,
that's
yeah.
it. Everybody gets their little space, and
Yeah.
some of them are tiny, you
Yeah,
know, and
yeah.
that's what they have to work. That's their work environment. And,
Yeah.
you know, depending
Yeah.
on the job you do, if you're a secretary or something
Yeah.
like that, that's pretty
Yeah.
much all the space that you do need.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
now investing into people is something that, you know, the county has high turnover.
Mhm.
You know, they've had for years. Most of the time, I'll ask you this because I really don't know. Do they do exit interviews with employees when they leave?
You know, they do have informal conversations
Mhm.
in HR. And I believe that is truly more recently in the last year or so. I mean, but they've always been informal. So there isn't a checklist of, here are the 10 questions.
There's no paper trail.
Right,
You'll
saying,
see
hey,
a commonality.
right. So when you
Mhm.
come in for your final checkout,
Yeah.
sit down
Yeah.
and please
Why you
answer these
leaving? What
10
could we have done differently? You know?
Exactly. And that's something we talk to the new HR director, and we see that's a shortcoming and deficiency.
Mhm.
But importantly, that's why, you know, something that took me 4 years to do, and all the row officers really resisted it the first time, was the employee survey. Remember, we just did here, was a week or so ago, the quote unquote, the sensing sessions.
Yes.
For recruitment and retention.
Yes.
Well, really, that was something that was, again, a day one motions about doing an employee survey to try to find out what's important to you, to the employees, what's going to help us recruit people, what's going to help us retain people, all those little issues. It's interesting. It is almost like when I sent out an email to the row officers about it, like this was about 2 years ago. I should print out all those emails. Every one of them, it looked like they all sat down together, and they all, except for one, sent me an email saying no, they didn't want to participate in any employee survey because what was it? They didn't have a say in what the questions are going to be and things like that, you know. But guess what? didn't you guys all just show up a week ago? So I got you in the end, and guess what? And all your people are going to a union, so you don't have a say at all anymore,
my,
because they just formed 2 more unions.
really? Well,
Yeah,
see, that's
Yeah, 2 more unions are forming.
that's what happens when you
Yeah.
have unhappy employees. And I will tell you, let's go back to 1986 when Scotty Pompa was working up at the Carbon County Prison as a corrections officer, and our warden was going down and getting raises for himself, and he'd come back and we would say,
Yeah,
what did you get for us? Oh, I didn't get anything for you guys. Well, the next thing we're a bunch of disgruntled people.
Yeah.
What do? Pick up the phone and call the Teamsters.
Sure.
Hey, would you be interested in taking
Mhm.
us on?
Yeah.
So we had our vote, but that's what happens when you have employees who are not happy,
Yeah.
may not trust the boss,
Yeah.
we're gonna get some representation here, and
Yeah.
somebody's gonna get us some raises. You
Right.
guys aren't doing it.
Right.
But the other side of that is too, they will pay union dues. They may have some things done for them like we did, $1 an hour for the first 3 years.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, hey, you're maxing out. We're only getting you 20 cents now,
Right.
and then they become disgruntled again.
Again, right, the grass is always
Yeah.
greener.
Unions
Right.
are always not the answer,
Yeah.
but in this situation, I can say I can't blame
Yeah.
them.
Well, you know what? Interesting enough, the sense is there were more people actually opposed to the union than actually interested in the union.
Mhm.
However, those opposed didn't vote, didn't go to the vote.
Oh, you're kidding? Oh, wow.
So if you check the numbers,
Mhm.
it was just slightly more than a handful of individuals voted.
Interesting.
It's all the individuals who didn't go and vote and say no. Or heard the feedback from folks.
So
And
now-
we know the numbers, we know the numbers and
Mhm.
stuff like that.
So now they'll be stuck with a union that they really don't have to join, I guess, if they don't want to.
Right, that's what I'm saying, right,
Uh-huh.
because they'll still be represented,
Right.
right? They'll still be represented to some point,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
How energetically, well, we shall see how they do. But it's interesting you mentioned the Teamsters, because the prison union has changed from Teamsters
I
to
heard.
the NCEU.
Mhm.
So that's something that's still really in progress, that full transition
Mm.
taking place to the NCEU and stuff like that,
Yeah.
Well,
It was odd when we would have contract discussions, our Teamster representative would come to the meeting and want to talk about truckers and guys getting blown off the top of trucks versus, what these correction officers are up against, because the Teamsters weren't really involved in that, side of the employment of COs and
Right,
prison.
yeah.
So it used to be interesting is that we would go and sit and watch the talks evolve.
Yeah.
And our rep would all of a sudden just start talking trucking,
Oh,
where we had no
no connection to
relationship
it.
to trucking
Sure.
whatsoever.
Yeah. No.
So let me ask you this though, Chris, you took some tough positions and you resisted some things that you were pretty successful in resisting too. Like I believe back in the early part of it was the windmills that were trying to
get
come
started.
to Penn Forest,
Yeah, it's interesting. I somehow, I started with the, helping advocating against the windmills in Penn Forest. And then, I got so passionate about it when the opportunity was presented to kind of be an advocate and be another opposing voice for the ones up in Weatherly or in Packer Township.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden I'm starting to see kind of the conservation side of me come out. And I take that back to my time, maybe working at Beltsville with Vince Gogol or something like that, because these issues have become so important to me, because I recognize one of the things I love so much about this area, and I think we value about this area, is its natural environment. So how can we protect our natural environment? Well, the aesthetics or the scenic scape, the viewscape is, keeping those windmills off our ridge lines first and foremost. But then you start thinking about, well, how do we protect Mock Chunk Lake Park? And that went to, basically, buying the Canic property. Interesting. Another opportunity, another demonstration of my colleagues' failure to vote. I was pushing that issue, and I believe I was actually the first one to actually raise that issue after Canic, months after Canic had come to the commissioners and asked us to sell him a little strip so he could have access. It was basically a strip across the switchback that he wanted. And right away I saw development as it was going to take place. And that kind of laid the groundwork in my mind saying, at some point, I'm going to have to fight to protect that water source and that recreational activity. So I was trying to force the borough's hand in his hand. And I had a motion on the agenda. And again, colleagues not reading, it said, assess the viability, or words similar to that, of actually taking that property from Canic, declaring eminent domain for the health and safety and welfare. It didn't say take the property,
Right.
But again, it was assess the viability. Now, I will tell you, I already knew the county could do it. It was having two people to have the, let's say, the intestinal fortitude out of three to say, if the borough's going to go ahead and pass where he's allowed to have septic, the only way we're going to protect Mock Chunk Lake Park is to take it. And I'll tell you what, I'd hate for private property to be taken from an individual, but I'll tell you what, that would have crossed the line for me.
Yeah.
You know, but I don't think one of my colleagues would have joined it. They wouldn't even, again, even though they didn't read the motion up correctly, you know, they wouldn't even assess the viability of declaring eminent domain to take that to protect Mock Chunk Lake Park.
Wow.
You know?
And sadly, in this situation, it was really only the county commissioners that could have done this, unlike when the Jim Thorpe School District wanted to build a school across from Bear Creek Lakes. And the community of Bear Creek Lakes is up in arms, you're going to pollute our lake.
Right.
And they fought it, and the school just caved and ended up building out at Penn Kidder, you know. But initially, when I graduated in 1979, we were told that's the future school going to be right there in that piece of property that's still owned by the school district. And the adjoining park, you know, was going to be the school, but the Bear Creek Lakes community made it very clear, we will fight you tooth and nail because you're not going to pollute our lake.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But in this situation, you didn't have people living out there.
That's right.
So it had to come back to government to step up and protect.
Yeah. Well, and one level of government wasn't prepared to do it.
Yeah.
What happened was the only reason they ended up voting against it is because we gave them the opportunity. We created the breathing room for them to vote against it. Because I have no doubt that if it wouldn't have been for county action, they would have voted to allow septic systems on Mock Chunk Lake Park. It may have been 4-3 or whatever, but I think they clearly had the votes to go ahead and allow septic systems to be built in that particular area.
That's sad. That's
you know?
scary.
But we got those 45 acres.
Yep.
You know, he came to us and sold it eventually because he knew it wasn't going to be able to be built on. So good for us and good for the county, you know, to have 45 acres on the other side. You know, basically that runs from basically the Jim Thorpe Summit Hill line, maybe 100 or so, 200 yards, you know, past the breast of the dam, you know, that whole strip there on the switchback side, or the Mount Pisgah side, excuse me, the Mount Pisgah side there.
So how high up into Pisgah did it actually go?
That one doesn't go all the way up. It doesn't go all the way up, but you know, the county does run that whole strip. Matter of fact, the majority of, you know, that strip that the county owns of kind of goes about 3/4 of the way up the mountain or so, but it does go up on top. Blue Angel is county property. The majority of Blue Angel, except for one little segment, that's actually county property.
Get out.
Yeah. So if someone would go up there and let's say they would take a car, drive it up there, shoot at it, create a fire, and push it over the bank into Blue Angel, they would be in violation of ordinances that Mock Chunk Lake Park has and DEP and EPA laws and regulations against pollution.
Holy smokes.
I wonder if someone marched 2019. Does that ring a bell to anyone in the public? Huh, you know, because there's something brewing.
Uh-huh.
So for you three who were involved, think about that, so.
Interesting.
Yeah, I had a little coded message of warning I had to send out there,
Uh-huh.
to some folks and stuff like that. But yeah, the windmill fight was a good one. And again, I was just a small
Well,
portion of that,
Yeah.
but again, I was leveraging social media.
you know,
And then I was going to the commissioners meeting. Remember, I took to the commissioners, Bill, Tommy, and Wayne. I drafted them a resolution, not saying they were against it, but they had to protect our ridge lines.
right, they wouldn't sign it.
They wouldn't sign it,
Uh-huh.
wouldn't sign
but
it,
other-
wouldn't consider it.
Other municipalities throughout Carbon County did, correct?
They had their own
Oh,
type of thing.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I had 2 or 3 that actually did.
uh-huh.
Look at it. But the county commissioners, obviously Tommy was the reason why they're building in Packard Township, because when he was on the township supervisor, he was the one who basically opened the door
Mhm.
by the resolution that they did allowing windmills up there.
Mm.
But they won't take a stand, and yet the Carbon County Comprehensive Plan says you'll protect the viewscape or the ridge lines.
Correct.
And here the commissioners wouldn't sign a document saying we need to adhere to the Carbon County Comprehensive Plan.
Huh.
And stuff like that, but
Well, there was also the Save the Bells. Were you part of that one?
save the bell.
Was that St. Mark's?
Oh, well, absolutely, but
Mhm.
I was attacking it for Save the Bell,
Mhm.
SOS, save our sanctuary.
Okay.
Right, save the bells. What the heck? Bells of Saint Mary, it's Christmas time and stuff like that. Yeah, but interesting, I was approaching it initially from a financial perspective.
Yeah,
That was the Susquehanna Street project,
correct.
where they're gonna build the Taj Mahal, a multi-level parking garage that the public wasn't gonna be able to utilize.
Mhm.
So I was attacking it from financial solvency or financial fiscal conservative nature, because it just didn't make sense in that area to do that particular. And then fortunately, an employee of St. Mark's really started the ground movement and started saying, hey, wait, this is a threat. So what we kind of do is we ended up attacking that issue from 2 different levels and putting those commissioners at the time on the spot. 2 things they did right before the election, May in 2019. So this would have been in April of 2019, because there was so much pressure. One, they decided that they wouldn't do the Susquehanna Street project, and they scaled back the EOTC, the Emergency Operation Training Center. And they did that solely for political reasons, because they were just getting hammered. And again, I played a role in that, hammering them, but there were others also who really brought to bear
Yes.
a lot of advocacy from different people. Matter of fact, the first guest that I hosted on Carbon Matters live streaming happened to be the leading advocate of that effort to protect St. Mark's, so good for her.
Absolutely.
And yeah, that was a big one. Thank you for bringing that one up, because that was an important one. Again, that was the free office and stuff like that.
Yes, it was.
But that was really good. Let's think of a couple other things here, Scott, that I want to ensure we hit upon also.
Sure.
I was doing a little reflection today after the commissioners meeting too, and I was reflecting partly on my colleagues who I worked with the last 4 years, and I was thinking, publicly how I presented myself, and I always thought that, and this kind of came about halfway through, I think, my term, I started saying it. You may not agree with where I stand, but you'll always know where I stand. And that was one thing I think I did really well. I was always out there saying, this is what I believe. This is why I believe it. Again, based on that research or these values or whatever I have. And this is where I stand. If you disagree with me, call 570-503-6780 or email me at c4commissioner@gmail or clukasevich@carboncounty.net. And that's one thing about my colleagues. I don't think there was consistency of knowing where they were on issues.
Sure.
Because they weren't out there publicly ensuring that transparency. I always thought maybe they were giving themselves wiggle room, as good politicians do at sometimes,
Yes, there's no doubt.
Yep.
You have hit the nail
Yep.
on the head with this one.
Yep.
I believe that, and this is what separated you from the rest of the group, is I believe that they are politicians and they're afraid to take a position one way or the other, and they will leave that wiggle room that you refer to for them to not maybe change their position, but just the way they present it to people.
Right, yeah,
is
maneuver space.
yes.
Yeah, and sometimes that's good, but my position was, as an elected official, before I go into a meeting, you should know where I'm going on a
Absolutely.
particular issue.
Yeah.
And while I will tell you, interesting, because and I know all my followers, so I know who is watching what I post and stuff like that. If you didn't hear it in a meeting, you definitely saw it on social media, or you saw it on my dry erase boards, because all my thoughts were there. Like I said, some of them were coded,
Yep.
No doubt, but every thought, every direction I was going was publicly brought out there in some form or fashion. It may have been in a comment I made to a Times News article. I think I'm a Gold Star member on Times News on their Facebook group or something.
Yep.
I'm always,
You got a top badge.
yeah, top badge and stuff like that. Because I'm always posting, the video or linking to the video clips of the actual meetings so people get the full picture, or I'm challenging things that may have been written, which
Yep.
I didn't think did do justice to what someone might have presented at a meeting and stuff like that. But you definitely, if you were an astute person or an informed voter, you always knew where I was at.
Absolutely.
For better or for worse.
Well, you know what, Chris, I approached my position in school board the same exact way.
Yeah.
And I feel at times it hurt me.
Well, of course
But
it does.
at the same time, I just felt like, hey, honesty is what you're going to get from me.
Right.
And it's best to know where I stand. At least you're going to get the God's honest truth out of me, rather than for me to say to your face, oh, I agree with your position, when I really don't.
Right. Yeah.
And a lot of people do play that game, unfortunately, and they have no problems getting reelected.
Right. Exactly. There's a cost to being honest.
There is.
And transparent and stuff like that.
Although you would think that would give you an advantage,
right?
It does not.
It doesn't. And it's interesting, and I'm going to throw some data out there because I'm a data person. Talk about transparency, and again, I've been leveraging social media, primarily Facebook, but also YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. Twitter started about 2 years ago, Instagram about a year plus ago, but Facebook the whole time, YouTube. On Facebook, I put 480 videos on my Facebook page, 1,155 informative images. I published over 400 official video live streams. I had over more than 20 guests on Carbon Matters live streaming. And that was all about trying to bring county government into people's living room, right? And again, like we talked about at the beginning, about, again, who's going to go, what employed person is going to have time on Thursday at 10:30 to go to a commissioners meeting?
Correct.
No one.
Right.
But the fact is, then let's at least make it available to them so that if they want to be an informed voter, they have the opportunity. And I tried to make it a little more interesting and to provide at least a personal perspective by leveraging social media and nearly 1,900 followers that go out there. And I will tell you, the other number I looked at that I haven't put here, I've spent thousands of dollars, right, thousands of dollars pushing those Facebook posts throughout Carbon County using Boost. I would do that all the time. Whenever I thought it was an important issue, I would go in, boom, 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 let me pay for 4 days of getting it pushed into everyone's feed. And I apologize if I annoyed you with every week there was another, you kept seeing something from Chris Lukasevich being forced into your feed because I was paying for it. But it was part of, putting my money where my mouth was when it came to transparency.
Transparency, you nailed it.
Yeah.
There is the word of all words, transparency. And the data that you are spewing out right now is nothing other than transparency, and transparency in government, we need a whole lot more of it.
I was trying to think, so as we kind of wrap up maybe a little bit, I was thinking about regrets, if there are any real regrets. I will tell you, I regret having done a mea culpa when I published a check on social media. I shouldn't apologize for that because I knew when I did that the county was already sending out from the commissioners and the offices of honor 750 plus checks a month to people we didn't know from accounts that could have been compromised. The account from the check that I published was an uncompromisable account. It was what's referred to as a holding account, meaning we take general fund money, we shift it into this other account, and then it just pushes out from there. No money can come in, nothing can be pulled out of there. It's just a holding account. And so for that reason, and then I didn't even, at the point, I didn't know, but I learned probably the day after, another office actually sends out checks daily to criminals from an office that quote unquote is associated with the courts. So what I did, that was a dumb thing because I'm north pretty good. The fact is it provided no risk to the county literally at all. It was politicized by obviously my colleagues. I was disappointed in a friend and a colleague who made a comment, an individual who for years allowed a clerk of courts to steal money and didn't do anything, right? And so this individual who held a row office made a public comment about he was so concerned about this, when the fact is should have been more concerned about that individual who's stealing money for 10 years from the county, because you and other row officers and commissioners did absolutely nothing to stem that theft. I didn't say it. The other thing I probably should have said at that time, there's a row officer who the person who raised this issue at that meeting, her office compromised sealed legal documents of individuals by putting their PII in an email. And I kept my mouth shut. And as she was speaking, I was sitting there saying, should I bite my tongue or should I go on the offense and attack? Because these were sealed cases, right? That no one should know in that office. And what I did when that occurred, because I was part of that email distribution, what I did, I emailed back to the individual who did that. And I said, hey, I think you should be aware of what you just did. You should take actions to correct that. I didn't go to the Times News or something. No, I said, hey, there's an issue. Take care of it. It can be corrected. That's how you handle things as professionals. Not saying you hide things, but the first thing you do, you go to the individual and say, hey, I have an issue with you, or I have a problem.
Well, Chris, there's no doubt the disclosure of that check, that whole situation, that was just a political debacle. That's what it was. And I know this because, of course, you're well aware that I was attacked at the Carbon County Fair because I was there supporting you.
Yeah,
How about that?
Yeah.
You go to a function at a
Right.
county fair
Yeah.
in support of a candidate,
yeah,
and I am attacked,
Yeah.
which was just crazy,
Yeah.
you know? And I mean, that's where we are in politics,
It is.
and I think that's sad. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what I call Carbon County politics.
yeah,
I hope it's not that way everywhere else, you
Yeah.
know, but we saw shifts,
Yeah.
okay? When we were younger, a Democrat was guaranteed to win an office in
Right,
Carbon
yeah.
County. Along comes Donald Trump, and all of a sudden the Republican Party is growing stronger and
Right.
stronger, and people want
Yeah.
to be Republicans. And many Democrats who I knew were longtime Democrats become Republicans, you know, but the mentality is what really scared me.
Yeah.
And it really came to light for me when I was invited to the Lincoln dinner.
Mm-hmm.
And I sat there that night wondering, this is my party.
Right.
I mean, I've been a Republican from the day that Charlie Wildonner, who was a Democrat, called
Right.
me at the Carbon County prison and says, if you're going to be a county employee, don't you think you should at least be a registered voter?
Right.
And
yeah.
I, you know, my family was always strong, valued Republican.
Yeah.
So I registered as a Republican
Yeah.
and have been one since.
Mhm.
But when you go and sit in a meeting like that and you're attacked at a fair, you know,
Right.
because what are the values of this party?
Yeah.
It's very scary.
Oh,
you know?
yeah.
And then you got somebody coming along like a Chris Lukasevich who
Mhm.
could really help us grow.
Yeah.
And we're going to resist them. We're going to fight them, and
Yeah.
we're going to release crazy things. Oh, this check, we're going to damage him as
Mhm.
a person. You
Mhm.
know, it was just politicized, and I
Yeah.
saw it as a, you know, a political circus.
Oh, it was.
is
you know.
what it was.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So,
But again, going back to it, I should not have apologized for it. I took ownership of my mistake, is what I did, and that's how I was brought up in the military. You accept the mistakes, you take corrective action, and you move on. But in this particular instance, you know, hindsight, 72 hours after, said no, absolutely should have just went boom on the offensive and attack,
yeah.
as tends to be my nature
Um,
at times, and maybe it's my passionate assertiveness, as I like to refer to it. What I'd like to do you have any last questions,
Let me just
or
check
comments?
well, no, I think I've covered most of
Yep.
what I wanted to do.
Yep.
There is one last thing. You know, when we talk about money, as long as I know we're running short on time,
No,
but
sure.
I just want to hit on the amount of revenue that is being generated by the parking that is allowed in the county lot and by tourists. You know, this is tourism. They are basically providing a huge shot in the arm to the county's financial, you know, projections for anything. Where can we borrow money from?
Yeah.
We're going to borrow it from the parking
Yeah.
fund. There is a huge amount of revenue there. I know the county is not really in the tourism business. They
Correct.
don't run the trains. They don't
Right.
do anything like that.
Right.
So they generously open up their parking lot,
Mhm.
which is, Chris, the December that we just went through was like a December in the 4 years that I have worked in
Yeah.
in the parking department. I never saw anything like it. It's just growing and growing larger. Now I know you're moving on, but this is the one thing that I don't quite understand, and this also comes from my experience in the school board.
Yeah.
Governmental agencies that don't work together, I just don't quite understand. I mean, this is a situation here with this parking. We saw what happened in October,
Mhm.
where people really have to get together and say, what are we going to do? You can't limit the people coming in.
No, you can't.
just
You
can't
stay
say
out of the race.
we're
Right.
shutting our town down. You
Right.
know, don't you let anybody in that parking lot. They have to keep going through.
Yep.
That to me is like declaring martial law. You know,
Yep.
you just don't do stuff like that. But
Yeah.
everybody needs to sit down at the table and figure out what are we going to do, because it's just getting larger and larger. But the county right now is a huge benefactor because
Yep.
of the parking.
Yeah, and we will be, depending on what occurs the next 3 days, but we are $17,000 away from $1.1 million, which is a high. And that is due to, it's not due to the kiosk, it's due to the number of people that are using the kiosk. It's the increase that's coming in.
Yep.
And stuff like that. And I think that is a result of, again, I using the term lately, the over tourism, too many people coming in, and our strategy for promoting Jim Thorpe has been so effective
It sure
that
has.
it's done it. But the problem is we haven't had a strategy for managing tourism. We've only had a strategy for promoting tourism. And now we're in that position where, how do we get the genie back in the bottle where all interest groups can have their needs met? The tourists, the business interests, and importantly, those of us who live here and have to put up with increasingly challenging difficulties or inconveniences associated with something that, if well managed, is a good thing. And again, I don't know the solution. I truly don't. I'm advocating for smart people to come together and develop a tourism management strategy. Part of that might be pulling back on the amount of advertising that does take place. We're over promoting the place. We're at the point of saturation. I always say we don't have enough restaurants, we don't have enough restrooms, we don't have enough parking, we don't have enough activities, and we don't have enough physical space.
Well, I'm going to go back to social media on this one, because it is a main player in this. Even though the Pocono Mountain Vacation Bureau has expanded their horizons on where they are now promoting Jim Thorpe. In September, I was in the Jim Thorpe market, and the woman who works there said to me, "I know you work over at the parking." She said, "I just wanted to show you what you're in for next month." She pulled up a TikTok video that was on social media about Jim Thorpe. Over 2 million views. Wow. And all of these people were commenting how they're coming to Jim Thorpe. And she said, they're coming. And guess what, Chris? They came. And they're still coming. Yeah. I never, from October, November, December, saw in my years working down there 3 months like the 3 months we just had. It was like, whew. I mean, just this week alone, the parking lot's been full every day.
Oh yeah, it has. And I've been sitting there when I'm standing at my computer, because to take a break from the screen, I'll just look out the window and just see the cars coming in and out. I'm glad you hit on this, because we're talking about the visitors and the revenue that they bring, specifically what is now the 1.1 million, which is a historical high for the county. And it's interesting, sometimes when the weather's not perfect, you actually make more money than a beautiful day, because you get more turnover in the daily lot.
Correct.
Versus people just hanging out for 8 hours and not opening spaces.
Yep.
But people would ask me, what are the two things probably you're proudest of? First and foremost, I'm going to say, in general, overall, it's how hard I worked to accomplish the vision that I laid out, and how successful I think I was in accomplishing as much as I possibly could, given the situation that I had to work in. But if I had to look at specific things, it would go into the transparency in government, and then trying to educate the public about county government, to include the County Government 101 presentations I do, plus all the social media. But secondly, the railroad sale. That was so important to me. I saw, probably even 2 years or so before I ran for office, went to a couple railroad commission meetings, which almost nothing is done there except paying bills. I knew that Carbon County government could not run a railroad. And matter of fact, we are making a few tens of thousands of dollars on it each year from freight that Andy Mueller, who was leasing the railroad for decades, would provide us based upon the amount of freight that went across our 19-mile railroad. So I told myself, I believe in privatization of the railroad. And Al Luedtke, in September of 2019, set up a meeting for me with Reading and Northern Railroad, Andy Muller's team. And Wayne Michelle was leading this particular roundtable discussion. And they sold me on their vision for their railroad. And they talked specifically about their lease of the Carbon County Railroad, the issues with it being a lease. It brought to my attention the inability of the counties, the inability of, or lack of expertise or lack of ability to maintain it.
Sure.
Because again, you lease an apartment to someone, right? You as the owner are responsible for maintaining it. That railroad needed millions of dollars of upgrades. The county couldn't do it. So on that day in September, I said, I'm going to make that sale happen. And I made that sale happen. And I tell you what I love so much about having made that sale happen is no one knows that I actually made that sale happen.
Wow.
But I'm going to tell you that myself and one individual from the railroad made that sale happen, regardless of what other people may think or say, or you may say your role in that sale was. There were two people, one from the railroad or one from the county, who made that happen. But what was so important about that wasn't about helping the railroad. It did help the railroad, but it also helped Carbon County in this way. One, I'm going to say half the Kovach plant was purchased by the railroad. So it's not laying dormant.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to see more movement up there of railroad employees who are going to use that particular side of the KME plant. And you can see the changes that are taking place up there. So again, it's not laying dormant. Importantly, though, what's driving the parking revenue is that train.
Oh, absolutely.
That train is driving it. And once Andy made additional investments, in-kind investments of already a couple $1 million into the railroad tracks in Carbon County alone, and he is only required to make $1.7 million of in-kind investments. He's far exceeded that. He started running additional trains, right? So again, there is a side effect to that, over tourism and overcrowding. But now we have trains coming from Pittston.
Yep.
We have more trains that are running from the Reading Outer Station and things of that nature coming to Jim Thorpe. And again, as these people come and visit on a train, that's keeping the cars out. But what has happened is that word of mouth. I'd love to come back to Jim Thorpe. And the next time they come, they're not necessarily coming on the train, but they're coming on a car and they're parking in the county lot. And they're raising $1.1 million, which is $1.1 million less in taxation.
Sure.
And that's when I talked about revenue.
Yep.
Yep. And we did, and part of that revenue too was, in your time when we were updating, we did raise the prices a little bit more, primarily that has impacted tourism, because the fact is, when it comes to the hourly rate, we're just matching the borough of Jim Thorpe's rate.
Correct.
And I got to mention 2 hours validated parking. If you're a county citizen, you have an issue or you want to pre-schedule an appointment with one of the offices other than the district attorney never signed on to the program, but every other row office, department, the courts, you go ahead, call, you can get a special code for 2 hours of free parking to go do county business, private county business.
Absolutely.
Personal
and
business,
as an employee who works in that
Yep.
lot, I am seeing more and more of it used.
Yep.
And when people come in and they say they're here to conduct
Yep.
county business, I will always inform them. The
Yep.
next time you come, call that office
Yep.
and get a code.
Get a validated parking.
Yep.
So we are benefiting, and it's like we work together with the post office.
Yes.
Right? We heard from individuals, we worked together with the post office to get a spot for county residents and others who are using the post office to have a dedicated space.
Absolutely.
Another great coup.
And Chris, I see it utilized all the time.
Yeah.
I will watch that when I'm working in the
Yeah.
lot. I will watch out there
Yeah.
and I will see residents pull in there, go to the post office, do their thing. They're glad to have that spot. They
Yeah.
are.
That
One
was a good
spot
one.
is all they need.
Yeah, no, that
It
works
works.
out good.
Yep.
Yeah, let me just show one little thing. I'm going to do a quick screen share here.
Sure.
This was actually supposed to broadcast at the commissioners meeting today, but due to technical difficulties there, it didn't go. So let me pull this up. Make sure. So this is talking about those, what I would say is those issues, actions, results that I had a decisive role in. So as it finishes up, I want to give credit to the Blasters and for their rendition of So Long, Baby, a Goodbye. But the fact is, you know, in 4 years, I, listen, being humble, have had a significant impact. I've achieved what I wanted to achieve. I've paid the debt that I had. And as I've always said, a debt is like a mortgage. And once that mortgage is paid, you don't keep sending the check to the bank. And in my 4 years, I paid that debt, and that debt was the payback for, you know, being brought up here in the values, the work ethics, the beliefs and values under which I was raised in this community. So I've done what I've intended to do on my first term in office. And I'm happy and content.
Absolutely.
You
have, Chris.
Yeah, thanks.
And I, on behalf of everyone in Carbon County and myself,
All right.
I just want to thank you for everything that you have done for this county.
No, thanks, Scott, and thank you for being along on the ride.
It's been a fun ride. It has. I've enjoyed it. And can I ask one last question?
Yeah, of course.
Is there a future in politics, or?
Well, I did make a promise to my mother. If she reaches her 100th birthday, I would run for office again. Not ruling out any other run at any other time, but I did make the promise to her if she reaches 100, and that is what, 3 years away, Maggie? Yeah, that I would run for political office again. Now that could be dog catcher, but I promised her I would definitely run and stuff like that.
Well, it's been a fantastic, I'm going to say 5 years, 6 years, actually, almost 6 years in the making. And it's been an enjoyable ride for me. And actually it is what pushed me to want to become involved in government myself. And I decided to make a run for school board. And, you know, I believe that was also very well
Well,
and
yep.
successful, and just like you,
Yep.
I was straightforward with people and honest, and I
Yep.
believe that's, you know,
Yep.
again, repaying the community
Yep.
for what they invested in me.
Right,
And I
so,
remember you saying
Yep.
that right from the get-go.
Yep.
I am doing this to repay the community
Yep.
for what they invested in me,
Yep.
and I believe we certainly,
Yep.
we got our worth out of it.
right, that's right. I think what we both did, right? The citizens we serve got a return on their investment.
Absolutely.
You know, whatever that was, whatever that investment was, they got a positive return on it, be it your role in the school board or mine as a county commissioner. And again, 2 kids from up on the hill making a difference.
Absolutely.
Right.
And if I have one word to anybody out
Yeah.
there, be involved,
Yep.
pay attention,
Yep.
and really follow what's going on in your
Yeah.
government, because it does impact you every day.
Yep.
And to sit back and think that it doesn't is really a miscalculation on your end.
Yep. Good night. All right. Good night, everyone. Have a happy new year.
Happy New Year.
Yep.